Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nancy Michael, and I want to thank you for joining us today on our pre-show webinar series. The webinar that we're going to present today is new to our lineup, and I'm pleased to introduce our expert professional visual merchandiser, Matthew Goodman. Matthew is going to take us through this very important topic on the essentials of a well-designed booth. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Matthew.
Well,
Take
thank
it away,
you for
Matt.
Thank you for that warm introduction. I'm really excited to be here with you and with the International Home and Houseware Show. So this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the IHA website under the Education tab. For further information or an introduction, please contact Nancy Michael, who just introduced me. She's the Senior Manager of Trade Show Business Development, or your sales representative at 847-692-0139. So we're going to move on to the next slide. I'm the presenter. I am Matthew Goodman, and I am a honors graduate from Fashion Institute of Technology in New York. And I returned there to serve as an adjunct professor in the visual merchandising program. And I'm also a licensed interior designer holding a NCIDQ, National Qualification of Interior Design. And I also recently passed my project manager PMP professional project management exam. So this is my contact information, and I'm available for the IHA show members for consultation as well. So feel free to take a snapshot of this for my information, and I have a website as well as an email and a LinkedIn account too. So I'm going to move on. I'm a 20-year expert, and I have a career in visual merchandising, which is basically laying out of product on a real kind of technical retail math and wholesale math level. And I've worked in global trade shows and national retail giants. I've worked for Victoria's Secret, Macy's, Lord & Taylor, and a lot of shopping mall developers, and a lot of those developers also listed on the New York Stock Exchange. So, you know, these are kind of like the big guns. So today we'll uncover the essentials needed to elevate your booth presentation across all price points. The IHA is launching a Best in Booth Design Award too, based on many of the topics within this webinar. So please visit that information to gather more information about it at www.housewareshow.org/show/boothmanship. Sorry, that's a mouthful. Or you could go on the same way and pick it up from housewareshow.org/show/marketing-kit. And I'll take and answer questions throughout the presentation. So that's a little bit about my background. Now let's talk about what this section is going to offer in terms of guidance. We'll talk about property use, color application, graphics, lighting, display fixtures, product placement, and some move-in suggestions. So the first topic is through property use. And many popular movies and theater productions and retail stores use properties, also called like props, is kind of a nickname, to set a tone in a story and help. These help to define the time period, the location, guidance for the audience through the narrative leading to the conclusion. You know, in our case, that will hopefully be, you know, closing a sale. The props can also help to deal with things like conveying the product line essence, understanding your product use, and increasing the chances of a buyer really entering your booth. So I have like pictures of famous props that we know of generally through motion pictures, and once we see those, it kind of like immediately conjures up a feeling, and that's what I kind of would like to emulate in your booths as well. So for example, props aid in conveying an essence of a product line with a quick glance. So Farmhouse Fresh in the upper left corner has like gigantic oversized fire-resistant flower and floral made of paper. But, you know, it can be just as easy as placing citrus in your basket, too. So these things really help to define the look and the feel immediately of your product. Props can be used to help a story. So here, stick with me when I say a story. So the first slide, or so the first picture in the slide to the left, the merchandise has flowers in it. But if you look above, it's almost like a chandelier effect. There's vases with more kind of like flower and like a greenery in it. So this story, if you will, could be branched into two ways. One way and one path is to go with like an oversized dry wisteria, real oversized, with a glass presentation. But the other way is to go with your basic product, like what would it be? Like a repeat of your spoons that are poised to be your best seller. The other thing props do is kind of like aid in telling the story of how the merchandise functions. So these to the bottom right are wine glasses, but it's kind of like spill-proof wine glass, if you will, and the prop is actually the board, which is on a tilt. So kind of like shows immediately, without you having to stand in your booth and reiterate many times a day how this functions, the board actually tells the story for you. So you can also introduce a texture or a background, and it can better tell the story of how merchandise is displayed. And right above the text is like a presentation of like a 4th of July summer feel. So you immediately get that feeling, you know, on a budget of like how you want to move the merchandise and how it would be best displayed and portrayed within a national holiday, or moving over to the right, more of like a kind of an Asiatic theme. For example, the like the woven braided texture underneath the red kettle, you know, that kind of sets a mood and a tone, as well as when you go one picture below, the woven mats also set a tone as well. So you can kind of like get a feel of how the merchandise is presented and flows through propping. You can also introduce a textured background to better tell a story. So, I mean, I know that we're talking a lot about storytelling, and that's a little bit of visual merchandising as well. For example, like I don't think that this merchandise actually arrives with the wooden blocks. You know, those are just like for build-up. And I think that's it kind of like vacillates between propping and visual texturizing that is introduced and to raise the product as well. So props convey the essence of a line with a quick glance. So to the right is dishware, but they're also showing these like wonderful white aspen pines and this kind of birch look with the chandelier, that kind of rustic chandelier. And to the right is a type of display that shows just like with the special floral and it really sets a tone of like this could be kind of like indoor-outdoor city patio feel. So immediately you get a tone and a feel through propping of how this merchandise is to be used in its kind of like final destination. Now this is like a real fun piece here. I put this in to kind of like purposely give you guys a jolt, if you will, like a fun jolt. So props can be used to tell a story. So this is an example of how the product also doubles as the props. So feel free to have fun with your merchandise and show your merchandise in fun and dynamic ways as well. Now, I'm not expecting everybody to go out and get a mannequin and immediately, you know, put your merchandise on as the skirting, but I think it's like a really good intro to say, hey, you know, don't feel obliged to only show your goods in a traditional way. Again, you know, I think that the main key here is become inspired by displays that are in other industries. I'm not expecting you guys to, you know, run out and make a gigantic shoe sculpture out of pots and can lids in your display booth. But what I am kind of conveying is hey, get on out there and see what other industries are doing and try to lend your ideas to your own booths that way. I think this is a really fun way. Yes?
We have a question.
Okay, sure.
So the question says, I'm not that creative. How can I best figure out what prop to buy and place in my booth?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, we get a lot of people with like business backgrounds who are like suddenly thrown into, oh my goodness, I have to decorate a booth. And you know, I'm a numbers crunching kind of person and I'm really good at freight, but I don't know how to put it on display. You know, one thing I've noticed is that a lot of companies already have pictures and literature or something on the website already of their product in action. So I would start by looking to see what your product is doing within the company website or in the literature. And if there's props with that, go for it, and that'll actually create further branding. And that way you can, for example, let me move on to like the next page. For example, if you sell pie pans, you don't necessarily have to do a gigantic, display of something cascading behind a visual presentation for a fashion brand. This is a really great inspiration. What you could do is kind of take it to I'm going to the next page, the next level, and say like, hey, maybe we should just introduce a simple football or like a cool shined up bicycle like this company did. It's called Shinola, and they're based out of Detroit. So what they did was they actually have a presentation in their literature that has these types of props already, and they have like a boy throwing a football and wearing the watch. So they actually took that prop and just placed it right on display within their display case. I hope that was a clear enough answer for you. If you do have any other questions, please feel free to ask. What we'll do is we'll move on to texture and color for the applications. So color is a really great and significant tool in booth presentations and visual merchandising. Combined with the use of interesting texture, color can be used to do a number of things, like make visitors feel different emotions, suggest associations about product attributes, influence behavior of buyers, and evoke different reactions. So for example, I know that was a little esoteric, rough textures like fake stone, faux stone, and slate can suggest a rugged country look. Smooth textures like polished metals and glass can evoke a sleek urban look. So here it is, guys. This is kind of like, if this were Oprah magazine, this is like the breathing moment. This is like the centerfold. Like, wow, this is awesome. Goods can be presented in a monochromatic color scheme. This is not from a gallery or a museum. This is from an actual display in a trade show. So what I'm going to do is leave this up for just a couple seconds and let you absorb it, because I think this is a really important slide. But again, you're also welcome to go back onto the website where this will be posted after the presentation. Goods can be presented within a monochromatic color scheme. So one way, the previous way that I showed was like really super monochromatic, but the other way is like, hey, just what about all white merchandise with a little splash of color, and how it can be shown in the wholesale setting and how it can be best visualized into the retail setting. Goods can be also presented within a color scheme of limited suggestion. And so it's not just like presenting just a few different colors within the selection of your merchandise. You can see here, I purposely talked about props beforehand. They're actually propping out this area too. So there's like hair brushes, hair accessories, a sachet with some texture as well in there. So I think that this really kind of brings the whole look together. If you can imagine this display without the propping as well and without much color, I think it would be like a different look. I'm not so sure how successful it would be. Goods can be presented within a limited color scheme. So, we talked about one color, two colors. Now it's just like a limited color scheme, which can be very like tony. And we talked a little bit about the texture as well. Goods can be grouped together with texture and shape. So it's not just the texture of the background, but it's the texture of the merchandise. And as you can see here, the stemware is actually placed together monochromatically as well. So you've got the red stemware and the yellow stemware together, etc. I think the blue really sets the tone as well. It's something that's a little bit unexpected. Goods can be grouped together by a similar color and texture and shape, like in the upper left-hand corner. Now, I purposely put this slide in on the right-hand corner. Items that are not similar in shape can be grouped together in the same texture and background, which can kind of like hold the story together. So you've got this, I guess we're going to call it like a country western feel for barbecue with the lower right corner picture. And they have this really great textured background of the slat wall, but the slat wall is wood. And I do think that it really holds it together. Imagine this slat wall if it were white, or a white pegboard. I think that the display would kind of really fall apart and not be as successful and as wonderful as it is. So if your goods are a little bit different than each other and don't hang well together, consider holding the look together and the story together with the same kind of like a textured thematic background. Okay, so speaking of like cool thematic backgrounds, become inspired by displays in other industries. This display featuring surfboards would translate really well into an exhibit promoting island-style surfwear. Imagine a couple more tables in the front on the white flooring surface with like island-style surfwear and really propping it out. How cool would that be? I know that you don't all have the real estate for this, and you don't all have like the giant surfboard props immediately. But you can definitely become inspired by the graphics and the background and the texture. And the fact that there's a white floor and a textured background, I just think is really exciting and very inspiring. Okay, and then we could go like more on the simple side. Goods can be presented within a color scheme that's a limited suggestion while introducing a displayed surface that's textured. So these are kind of like cutting boards that are putting the items on display with the white and the purple butter spreaders, as well as with the new soda style forks. Color and texture can set a tone and mood for a display. These are all display pictures taken from trade shows. None of this is from like a museum or a funky art gallery. I've really worked hard to curate these photos for you. So I think that one thing that hangs together with all of these wonderful photos is the fact that we're using the reds as well as introducing some whites. So in the upper left-hand corner is like a kind of a citrus juicer gone wild display. And it is from another trade show, but it's just like shows you what can happen and the mood and the evoke and how it can evoke a different mood and feel very special and kind of like artsy and funky, yet with the same exact colors and textures we have on the lower version. Right below that is a picture straight out of the show that we're talking about, and it's the same reds and the same whites, and it's almost the same textures. It's a very slick look. I think that you can really set a tone with the different textures and lighting, and we'll get into texture and lighting as well a little bit later with the lighting segment. And then to the right is that, oh, yep, sure.
All right, we got another question.
Okay.
What are some ways that I can make our booth look more colorful?
Oh, all right, that's a great question. Thanks for coming forward for that person who posed it. There's a number of different booth packages in the upcoming show. So depending on your booth package, I know that in some booth packages, and I think most booth packages, you have the ability to paint or staple, and so you can do your own painting or stapling or nailing into the backboard. If you don't have that ability, you also have the ability to get giant prints and then place them on your backboard as well. We'll talk a little bit about printing later, but these are some of the ways that you can lend kind of a colorful and textured personality to your booth if your booth doesn't already have it already. So I'm going to just move on and become inspired by displays in other industries. So I just thought it was really interesting how this furniture display really inspired kind of like the same look as this houseware exhibit, and it's shown in the similar format of color and texture, and they're both using like a real high gloss white pedestal run on a diagonal within the booth with the same color schemes and almost even the same compositional layout. I was really just kind of like taken by both of these photos, and I just thought it was necessary to show this within our conversation. And then also, speaking of becoming inspired from different industries, the surfaces can be inspirational too. I know that sounds a little bit way off, but let me dig into that, do a deeper dive. They could lend themselves to fashionably showcase housewares here. So even though this special exhibit is not a houseware exhibit straight up, wouldn't it lend itself so well to some of the product that we have, considering the color and the scale and the texture? And if you're concerned about, let's say, shipping, because oh wow, this is going to be really heavy to ship, There could be replacements. You could talk about like getting inspiration but then substituting. So you could use pop-up stools to replace heavy pedestals, for example. And I really love this type of this look of the pop-up stool with this kind of like fire-resistant paper accordion look. This is an entire booth made of that. The surfaces of this exhibit could totally lend themselves to fashionably showcase housewares. And wouldn't it be great to have something like this on display? So if you're thinking that your goods are very slick and this is kind of like a real earthy look, how great would it be to contrast it and show it in an environment similar to this? I'm going to move on because if you think about this as like the exterior, especially the upper left-hand corner, I'm going to take you inside the same booth. Okay, so this is the same booth, and how great would it be to put our houseware goods on display on top of these this surface? And it's like almost screaming for more merchandise, and a lot of it too. And I thought it was really cool just to share with you, speaking of lights that we're going to talk about and propping, that the light fixture is also made of this kind of paper accordion material too. So goods can be presented within a monochromatic color scheme within different textures too. Earlier, about 2 slides ago, we talked about different textures and how your texture can be really like very different from the background. So in this example, we have goods that are really slick texture up in the front, in the foreground, but the background of that like gigantic chandelier is like kind of like a crunchier feel. You know, it's not a slick, high-tech chandelier. It's kind of like a traditional chandelier that has a little bit of an edge to it. So I think that this is a great contrast. Now, again, I'm not expecting everybody to run out and get a gigantic chandelier, but what I can say is, you know, become inspired by this. I mean, how great would it be to take this texture feel, if you've got slicker merchandise, and turn it into, if you will, sea glass? You know, so we've kind of like been inspired by this gigantic chandelier, but what can we get for that like crunchier, tonier look? Hey, what about getting sea glass off the internet and spreading it among our slicker merchandise? I mean, I think that would be a really fun way of showing product. And in fact, I've shown product like that, and it's sold very well. So I think that the overall like general tip in this segment is to borrow display ideas from other industries, and these presentations would translate really well for featuring our own houseware product. Wouldn't it be great to show some white, punchy, chromy merchandise in the front of the red background? And wouldn't it be fun to show some kind of like dinnerware setting, or, you know, breakfast at Tiffany's kind of setting with this Audrey Hepburn kind of graffiti-esque look in the back? So have fun with your merchandise presentation and really be inspired by other displays. We're going to move on to graphics. And I would say that the use of graphics in photography and booth displays is really an effective way of grabbing attention and communicating information to buyers. And the most common form of communication in trade shows through text and signage is to promote newness, new products, which we're really excited to show at this show, order minimums and show specials. Signage can be short and clear in terms of its messaging, and definitely consistent with the brand's marketing and communication model. I know that we talked a little bit about that earlier in propping, and we can really consider this and continue that whole conversation with signage as well. So we have like the signage and the propping now being really, you know, echoing the whole look of the marketing communication. So if you've got graphics already and propping and signage already kind of like embedded in your company brochure or your communications through your e-marketing or through your website, this would be a great way to kind of like just bring it to more of a three-dimensional life. So printed logos and slogans can capture the spirit of a company presentation. And I'll leave that up for just a couple seconds. And you can kind of like feel that, you know, you immediately know that this, you know, these are these types of booths. Better life starts at a home. I think that's just fantastic. So that's like their slogan too. Again, examples of slogans that capture the company's spirit of the presentation. They can be on the back wall or the front kickstand, or they can be on the outside wall facing like a passerby. So use signage opportunities to educate buyers about newness, deals, promotions, minimums, and product attributes. This picture to the upper left corner is not out of a gallery. It looks very like museum and gallery-esque, but it's actually in a trade show booth. It's just talking about the attributes of like a butter dish and the different sizes and different colors. And to the bottom, it said, like, did you know butter does not require refrigeration? It's spreadable for the entire nation. I mean, that really kind of says it. Like, okay, great, we can have this butter dish and keep it outside, and we don't need to pop it in the fridge at night.
Matthew?
Yes?
We got another question.
Oh, great. There's so many great questions.
This one says, where can we get large-scale graphics printed to place on our display?
Oh, okay. That's fantastic. Large-scale graphics you can get through a number of places, but let's talk first of all about your artwork. What you need to do is gather artwork that is able to be blown up in a large-scale graphic, and without getting too technical, I would recommend something, and you can speak with your graphics people about this, that is no less than 300 DPI dots per inch, or per pixel, if you will. So the other part is once you have that artwork gathered, which I have a feeling many exhibitors have already, because they have to have their literature out there in the marketplace. You can have it printed through a large-scale printer. I know that Freeman, the general contractor, does the large-scale printing, and there's other people who do large-scale printing as well. But the great thing about Freeman is that they'll deliver it to your booth, and they may even install it depending on your conversation and your order with them. I hope that I've been able to answer that question. If you do have any other questions, feel free to give a call in, chime in. I'm going to move on. So become inspired by displays in other industries and using signage opportunities to educate buyers more so. I know that this is a textile display, but how great would it be to have this idea and lend it to ourselves and put really cool packaging and any box tops that we have that already exist on display within the booth. I mean, I just thought that was such a fun, great idea. And then also, a little bit touching on our subject before, in the upper left corner, this is actually a white booth that's only painted with two panels. One's black and one's red with the logo on top of it. And I just think it kind of does the trick, and it says it. So I think that this display is really important to show you, to become inspired by what can happen in a 10 by 10 booth. And again, here we actually said, check out the possibilities of what can be done in a 10 by 10. I mean, this could almost be like a whole other webinar. But just because you have a 10 by 10, feel free, to do really wonderful and creative things with it. Just because you're getting like a white 10 by 10, borrow inspiration from other displays. So for example, these displays and companies use rub-down transfer graphics that you can also get to set the tone for your booth. So you can get your company logo and send it to your printer and ask them to make it into like a rub-down transfer letter, and then you can rub it down onto the back wall of your booth. It is permanent. You're going to leave it at the show. You're not going to take it with you. You're going to have to get another set of rub-down transfer letters each time you do a trade show booth in this style. But I think it also just lends a really great look. I mean, it almost looks like, old-fashioned silk screening and kind of like, an up-to-date print, like a screen print on it. I just think it's a really nice look. So your company logo, let's talk about the placement of your logo, can be placed squarely on the back wall of your booth, like for Bloke, or it can be placed in an equally strong area on the side walls of your booth, but kind of like toward the front to capture the attention of the buyers from down the aisle, like Liv Viva did. And signage can be above eye level, but can be in a three-dimensional format too. So before we had mentioned everything kind of like in printing. But if you really want to go for it and do like a 3D format, this is like a real fun source of inspiration that mixes 3D format with pictures of the merchandise in a 2D format. Most overhead signage in the show is floor supported, meaning it's not, oh, yep.
Matthew, sorry.
Yes, sure.
We got a question here.
Okay.
How do I deal with lots of really large items?
Are we talking about graphics or the actual product?
I'm testing, inflatables. It's inflatables. So large inflatable items, so product.
Okay, sure. I mean, well, certainly, I mean, I think that these are going to be attention grabbers. So certainly put your top sellers on display within your booth. But if you just don't have the real estate to show everything, I mean, I think this would be a great way to dovetail back to graphics of getting your merchandise in action and getting large-scale graphics and putting them up in your booth too. I mean, I could picture this as a very colorful, very interesting and attractive booth if the graphics were placed up of the inflatable merchandise in the back and the side walls. I hope I've been able to answer that question, and that was a really good one. And most overhead signage is floor supported, which means in this show it's not hanging from the ceiling. But this signage type needs to adhere to strict height restrictions for your booth configuration. So go ahead and work with your sales manager to assure that these are going to match the rules and regs, so you have an easy setup. Again, here's an example of a booth that kind of looks almost like a pavilion to me. It is of Wusthof, and it's the same type of signage that's floor supported. And then overhead signage, you'll see at the show. This is an example that's ceiling hung, and ceiling hung installations for the booths are with pre-approval and a minimum of 1,000 square feet for your booth. So again, you need to work with your manager on that too. But you will see this at the show. I would say the overall tip for graphics is to, again, borrow display ideas from other industries. And wouldn't these presentations, and I know that they're not of Housewares, and I'm kind of like specifically doing this to, again, kind of like get your feet wet and shock you into this, if you will. But wouldn't it be great to borrow these ideas? We have a large-scale graphic on both of these for Illume and Nest in the back that show the product in action. Then there's a table in front of each. That's interesting tables with floral as well as like just the general props. They have the logo prominently located on center, and then even on the right, the left for Illume, they actually went further and they put a flocati down with like a giant, style sculpture in the style of like a giant diamond or something like that, just to kind of like really set the tone. I could see both of these displays translating directly into displays that we're producing for the Housewares show. And by the way, this is the exact same composition that I have seen in gourmet Housewares show retailers, just on your like Main Street USA. So we're going to move into lighting. This is kind of like one of my favorite aspects. So lighting aids in telling a story and a space. Whether a composition and a company provides a general wash of illumination to show mass merchandising, or if a business is focused on high-end products by featuring goods with specialty lighting. So some tips about the show: union labor, generally electrified lighting within the convention center. Exhibitors can install and plug in their own light fixtures. So be sure your cords are correctly installed, covered, and tucked in neatly, like behind your booth. So if you buy a light fixture from IKEA, you can bring it in and plug it in, but the union labor must supply the general juice to your booth. So we're going to talk about the types of lighting in the industry terms and kind of like the lighting industry: ambient, task, and accent. So ambient lighting is also known as general lighting, and it radiates a comfortable level of brightness without glare and allows you to see and walk safely. You're going to see this in convention centers, and in warehouses, and in gymnasiums. But please know, this is the tip for this slide. This may not be enough lighting to correctly show your product. So you're going to get general illumination from this type of lighting. But if you want something a little more, swanky, I would recommend other types of lighting like task lighting, which provides improved illumination to your work area. It may use different bulb types and in different shapes, such as clip-on lamps and things like that, and desk lamps and reading lamps. But here I showed your typical desk lamp, but then moving to the right, these are your typical clamp-on lighting for the types of lights that Freeman might supply. Accent lighting is going to add drama to your booth by creating visual interest, which is used to draw the eye to an interesting place or focal point within your stand. So this is an example of wholesale accent lighting. Now it's a little bit over the top. The general illumination of the convention center lighting is not on in the picture to the left, but it really shows you okay, this is accent lighting. So these are the types of lamps used on show site. And I'm going to go through this really quickly, but I think it's kind of important to know this to get the proper use of the lights. So first of all, the light bulbs are typically called lamps in the lighting industry. So if you hear me call them lamps, no, it's the bulb and not the light fixture I'm talking about. So these are called A lamps. They provide a warm and general illumination. You guys probably know of this very well. It's the same thing that symbolizes an idea, and you most likely have these types of lights in your own home. So you get kind of the feel of what your merchandise is going to look like under this type of lighting. It's a little bit more warm, some are incandescent, and some are LED. And so you pretty much know about these types of lights. I'm going to move on. Now, another type of lighting is called par lamps. These are more warm and focused, and this is the type of lighting that you're going to get under this par lamp. It's a little bit more like a spotlight, and they are for incandescent, but a lot of them are moving toward the LED and halogen feel, and they're going to be for more warmer illumination and for a general wash as well. And when I mean wash, it's kind of like a general spread, a general beam spread over the merchandise. Quartz halogen lamps, you guys probably know of this because you see it a lot in your retailers. And some are MR16s, which are like the light bulb to the upper light bulb, and you get kind of like a punchier feel. And then they're also moving to the LED lights, which come on a spool. And just check with your lighting distributor that some of the spools actually really do come directly with a plug, so you can plug it right into the service outlet. And the MR16 lamps are with a bi-pin mount, sometimes a screw base. They're cool, they're punchier, you get sharper shadows with it. Just a word about that, if you are installing your own lighting, please use cotton gloves. So if you've kind of eaten a muffin or a croissant in the morning, you're going to have a little extra oil on your fingers. Those oils actually burn the bulb out faster. You get a longer bulb life out of it. And I'm quite certain everybody knows about fluorescent lamps. I mean, I think everybody's either gone to school or worked under fluorescent lamps. But you'll also see that they have complex fluorescents now as well. These are a little bit cooler. They have very soft shadows. They've got a really wide beam spread. And this is a type of look that you're going to get with the fluorescent. And sometimes they come with a screw pin or a pin base. But most fluorescents, have that cool, broad illumination. So we're going to talk a little bit about the display fixtures as well. So that we're going to illuminate the display fixtures moving from the lighting section, and the display fixtures are types of furniture used to feature product in special ways. These unique fixtures are often used by retailers or wholesalers in their spaces. Having the merchandise visibly placed within each fixture is really essential. The buyers can place orders on what they see featured in your booth by touching or using the product, and then the placement of the product on your display fixture is to prominently feature your newly launched items. And before you actually purchase display fixtures or select to rent them, make sure that the merchandise actually fits on the display fixture too. Consider that your merchandise must be visible and easy to access. So placing your product, we're going to go from like real simple fixtures through this selection to kind of more complex fixtures. So placing your product on easels to present themselves in a standing position as dimension and poised to a display. It also keeps the goods from blocking each other. So these are examples of housewares that are like on easels or on pedestals. So more selection of easels and pedestals, and to the lower left, to the lower right, the easels really cascade up and present a great background as well. So the merchandise is, you're showing the merchandise, but it's also creating a background too, just with easels. More examples of displaying items, and the items seem to be kind of like standing upright and grabbing attention on the easel. I don't know how successful these displays would be if the products were just placed flat on the shelving without easels. You can introduce product on mini platforms and like mini pedestals to present themselves in a standing position. This will also aid in keeping items from blocking each other. And products can be on the mini platforms and have fun with the platforms as well. It doesn't have to be the standard cube that may be a rental cube. I mean, it could be these wonderful birch, like tree trunks, or even a cool table that looks like it's been repurposed. So this is a little bit more complex. Some companies choose to feature their goods on custom fixtures, and some companies choose to showcase their goods on stock fixtures. So you get kind of like a feel of like the different type of fixtures and furniture. Other companies choose to feature their goods on like semi-custom fixtures, which are stock fixtures or they're stock items with a special unique quality. For example, to the right, the fixture has a unique quality of the plexiglass or faux glass style shelving. With the display to the upper portion of the slide, this is like a special display fixture that was originally made for wide shelving, but they actually narrowed up the tensile pieces, and it's like for umbrellas. Some companies may choose to showcase their goods using a combination of both custom fixtures, like against the back wall, and stock fixtures that are on the floor. So feel free, to use to go to a place like IKEA or another knockdown furniture place to get one piece of furniture if you have another fixture that is custom, and then you would just basically paint them the same color or make sure that they would coordinate to kind of go all together within a display booth. And some companies may choose to showcase their goods by combining custom fixture parts. So you might introduce a marble tabletop with like stock legs. And become inspired by displays in other industries. These type of custom display fixtures would really lend themselves nicely to feature houseware items. I think that the display featuring the triangular fixture is really something that could showcase a very smaller type of houseware item and really lift it off the ground and get it up to eye level. And then I also think that the picture to the lower right would be great for something that would be shown like for a stovetop item or something that's going to be used like on a horizontal surface. I think that these are both really inspirational displays. And yes, if you're in your office thinking, hey, these aren't even showcasing houseware goods. Yes, that's correct. This is what we like. This is what we want to show and emulate and bring into our own houseware exhibits. These are also type of custom display. This is like more of like a kind of a residential feel. Some of these pictures were shown and briefly touched on in the lighting section, but we're kind of expanding on this, and it's got a little bit of a residential feel, a little bit of a tonier feel as well. So feel free to use residential items and combine them with like kind of commercial items, like the back the back wall shelving and the side wall shelving. By the way, isn't it really cool that they introduced their logo on a mirror? So that's another piece of inspiration too. We're going to talk a little bit about product placement. I know that we had a question before about product placement, and there's kind of like a theory that I like to abide by. So let me talk to you a little bit about that. And you know, next to lighting, this is actually, I think, my favorite as well. The overarching concept in displaying goods in your wholesale setting is to consider how your selection of merchandise will look in store. So capture the best way your merchandise will present itself for its final retail destination, like its home. Offer an opportunity for your buyers to visualize how well your goods will be seen within their own store environments, kind of like from wholesale to retail. We a little bit touched on this before, but let me talk about it. The next step is studying how the grouping of your merchandise behaves in a space and how it's best featured. So that's a little bit esoteric. So get a feel of the most trafficked area of your booth. Have your ability to depict how the flow of buyers arrive in your booth. Like, for example, when a buyer arrives in your booth and they pick up the first item and look at it and inspect it for quality, for attributes, that generally at that point they kind of say like, hi, you know, what's your minimum? That's your strike zone. That's your hot area. So if you feel that your best-selling product is not featured in there, I would highly recommend to feature it in that area, in your strike zone. Divide your merchandise into 3 groups: your newness, impulse, and flow. Newness are goods that your company is promoting, which is what we want to promote at the show. Within this grouping, you must identify your items that are poised to be your top performers and goods that are being introduced at the International Home and Houseware Show. Newness is also known as the new hero. So I may be referring to the new hero a lot and heroing out your product. So impulse merchandise is goods that are poised for add-ons to increase units per transaction when ordering. This type of merchandise is referred to as the sidekick. Within this grouping, you may have to identify the secondary items that will be and enhance the larger order and place it in a visible position near the new hero. So that's your sidekick. That's your, like, you know, Robin, if you will. The flow merchandise is goods that are created to hold a cluster of items together, yet are not necessarily poised as the top performers, as the 2 top performers. Companies that kick off, that have kickoff kits like this are usually items that are of this type of merchandise, like tongs to a martini shaker assembly or a checker tablecloth. Guys, I kind of withheld a little information from you here, and this is my fun surprise. Flow merchandise, I also refer to as the townspeople. You know, this is like the part in the, you know, the motion picture where the townspeople kind of get out and they cheer on the hero, and they have their pitchforks and their torches, and, you know, there's a lot of like hype about the hero. So they're really supporting the hero here. So take photos of your display booth to document the final design and the merchandise placement, because you're going to need that to refer to for your next show. Keep the presentation of your merchandise clear and distinguishable, kind of like how I suggested how the blow-up inflatable merchandise can be shown. And don't let the overwhelming use of products or display props become the villain by upstaging your merchandise and potentially eroding sales. Now, I know that this is one of Nancy's favorite photos, you know, the villain struck here, which is like, oh my goodness, what happened? You know, there's so much merchandise, there's a little sense of placement, there's a little sense of heroing out the merchandise. So we want to kind of like, you know, have our hero come to the rescue. So this is our example of hero to the rescue. This is merchandise that displays the hero of a product. Heroes can be repeated, like up on the upper left hand, or can be shown singularly to the lower right. These are more examples of merchandise displays. Heroes are usually placed in a trade show against the aisle to grab passers-by. That's a really great area to show your hero item. And that's probably going to be your strike zone as well. Goods can be shown in colorways, Now we're kind of like moving not necessarily away from the hero and the sidekick, but just showing how we can hero them out a little bit more so and grab attention with the hero products. Heroes or goods can be shown in colorways. They can also be shown in stories. So this is an example of an exhibitor called Muddy Girl, and they've actually shown a story. You know, this is a very different type of merchandise presentation. They could have chosen to present the same piece of merchandise in a repeated pattern, but they actually chose to show like a story, like a picnic table. And I would say that their hero is the wine holder or the bottle holder, or probably the apron as well. I'd be very interested to know and track the sales of these items compared to the other items. So your hero can be in a story as well as in a repetitive pattern. This is an example of goods that can be shown in stories, and I would say the hero here is probably the oven mitts and the garment of the garments to be worn in the kitchen. Or to the right, maybe it is the mugs. I would say those are probably your hero items there. But you can see how like the hero here is really with the sidekick, and as well as like the townspeople as well. The goods can be shown in a boutique style presentation or in a mass merchant style presentation, depending on who you want your buyer to be. And try different ways of showing your goods. Have fun with your product presentation. This company, for example, The Vivid, has their goods on display using many techniques, from laying out the product to showcasing merchandise with easels and cross-mix merchandising. So feel free to have fun with your presentation. And here's an example of a planogram. There's a lot of different like planogram files out there and ways to use planograms and software on it. But generally, I would recommend to take photos of your display booth to document the final design and merchandise placement for future reference for planogram development. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about move-in information, because I've noticed that, you know, once you're the display expert, you're also kind of, in a way, by default become like the move-in expert too, because you really have to know how to set up the display booth, and with that you're probably also going to be like the shipping expert within your company. There are 3 general methods for this show for delivering product for your booth, and I'll make it really fast. I know we're about to wrap up, but this is so important. There's pre-shipping for large products and parcels. There's personal drop-off through the ASUV program. We'll get into that in a second. And then there's pre-shipping for small parcels. But if you have any general questions on this, you know, take a screenshot, and you can visit the housewareshow.org and go to the shipping information on this. But these are like the general shipping tips that kind of like reverberate back into the earlier part of the webinar. So shipping is recommended for exhibitors who are from outside of Chicago. It's not recommended for fragile goods or prototypes, and you have to go to the holding warehouse or convention center within a specific time prior to the show. Depending on your booth package, most goods will be delivered directly to your booth as well. Personal drop-off program is recommended if you're located nearby. You can fit your items into a vehicle no larger than a van. You have prototypes, and you can park within 20 minutes to deliver your product. So you have to have 2 people in the vehicle, a valid parking pass, and 1 person to stay with the vehicle while the other shuttles to your display booth. If you have small goods or individual parcels, please, it's advisable to ship to yourself at the hotel. Small parcels are usually delivered to the convention center, but may not make it to your booth in time for show opening. And also for expensive items or prototypes, there's designated free security lockup. And it's just advisable not to store your valuables in your empty box, which is going to be stored by Freeman, because they're not really accessible during the show. Included in your booth fee is Freeman's Concierge Elite program. So basically this provides attention to exhibitors and enables the tracking and resolution of requests during the show. And exhibitors don't have to leave their booth. You'll have a Freeman representative come to your booth and handle the concerns that are traditionally handled from a nearby desk. After the show, generally goods are shipped out of the convention center by the way they arrived in the same method. So just check out your exhibitor services manual for that, for outbound directions. And also, if you are interested in leaving the items there at the convention center, the show has pre-authorized charity programs. So visit your setup manual for information on donating to those programs as well, by just leaving your goods in your booth or taking it to a specific area within the convention center right after the show breaks. Guys, thanks for being a great audience. I am available for individual consultation exclusively for exhibitors at the show, and please feel free to give me a call or an email or visit my website. I've had a great time. Thank you so much. Any questions?
No more questions. Thanks,
Okay.
everybody.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye-bye.